Brawl Stars was just banned in one of the largest countries in the world that, of course, also has one of the largest player bases for the game. That's right, Brawl Stars is now banned in Russia. And in fact, not just Brawl Stars, but all Supercell games are, for the moment, banned in Russia. Why did this happen? What's gonna happen to all of those Russian players? Will they get their money back? And how is the community reacting to this news? Let's do it. All right, now the best source of news is from the source itself. Here's exactly what Supercell said. In response to the ongoing war in Ukraine, Supercell has removed their games from the App Store in Russia and Belarus. Downloads are halted and access for existing players is suspended with the next client update. And also they add on, they stand with all people calling for peace to play a small part in addressing the ongoing crisis in Ukraine. They're donating 1 million euros to the UNHCR and are matching donations up to $1 million. Now this is a huge decision for Supercell to make. Of course, it is for a good cause, but Russia is, after all, one of their largest player bases, and this was something they had to heavily consider before making a decision like this. I mean, after all, Russia was 28% of the viewership of the Esports World Finals, and Esports tends to be a very big indicator of long-term success for games. And speaking of Esports, in part because of this decision, they're also halting further Esports events as far as the monthly qualifiers are concerned. They're actually going to be pausing those for the moment, in fairness to all competitors. So we'll have to see how long this sort of decision lasts, but of course, a lot of that's going to depend on how long the war in Ukraine lasts. And who knows with that? Of course, a decision like this has huge long-term impacts. I mean, not allowing those players to play the game, even if you later on allow them to play again, are they really going to want to come back after not playing the game for who knows how long, and also having it abruptly halted? You know, maybe they loved playing the game, but then they can't play it. They might start to resent Supercell or Brawl Stars or whatever Supercell game for not allowing them to play. Would they really want to return? And of course, this impacts things like content creation as well. Even though only about 1% of my viewers are Russian on TikTok, which is huge for Brawl Stars, a majority of them are Russian. About 44% of my TikTok followers are Russian, which is an insane amount, especially since I'm an English-speaking channel. And even though English is a common language in Russia, of course, it's not their primary language. But how are other people reacting to this huge, crazy change? What about DevArt, who's actually Russian? I'm not sure if he currently lives in Russia or if he lives in the US, but he says it's the most useless sanction he's ever seen. Do they realize the majority of players are kids? What are the kids gonna do? And I definitely understand where he's coming from with this take, but before I try and explain possibly why Supercell might be doing this, I do want to just go over a couple other reactions. Dandy Stuff adding on that mobile games are a great way to help people get through these rough and depressing times, and this will hurt the people more than the government, and I do think that's a very interesting opinion as well. I mean, obviously, it's not like banning Brawl Stars or Supercell games has any sort of military impact on the war. It's definitely just a financial type decision, but there are, of course, unfortunate consequences like this. I mean, there were a lot of other comments on that similar veins where games are a way to escape and people are sad that they're not going to be able to do that. Fancy Artist, a similar opinion. And definitely, if you just look at the replies for this tweet, the majority of them are either some sort of negative or just really not understanding why Supercell did this sort of thing. Real Canadian, we did it, Patrick. We saved the city. I mean, this definitely feels like a bad thing to be laughing at in this situation, but it's a fair meme, though. And definitely, I think this sort of just highlights the whole situation where Supercell made this crazy, huge statement, and it didn't really have much explanation behind it. And honestly, that might just be the best route, because almost no matter what they say, it's going to be hard to visibly see the impact that this change might possibly bring. Now, as far as why they actually did this, I can't possibly tell you what the official reasoning for Supercell is. I can only speculate what they possibly thought this would do. I mean, first off, there's a couple different angles. In general, the European Union is putting a lot of sanctions on Russia, and this involves not just military type companies, but a lot of different companies which in general just do business with Russia. They're putting sanctions to where Russia is not able to do business with them, and Supercell presumably is joining for a similar reason as this. In general, boycotts tend to only work if a lot of people or companies are participating in them. So I presume that's part of the reason why they added onto this, to help make the boycott stronger, possibly. And of course, there might be the added pressure of Russia threatening Finland, which of course is where Supercell headquarters is located, that if they do join NATO, serious military political consequences could happen to Finland. So from that perspective, for Finnish companies to be adding on to help prevent Russia from succeeding, I can definitely see where that train of thought comes from. But as far as what sort of impact banning this game is going to have on the Russian economy, well, it's hard to exactly say. I mean, obviously, Russia's not going to be getting any money from Brawl Stars. In general, when you put a game on the App Store or Google Play Store, you have to send that country a portion of your profits. I don't exactly know how the profit sharing works as far as what sort of percentage Russia might be getting from Supercell for all of their games being put up in their App Store and in their Google Play Store. They're no longer going to be getting any of that revenue. The other side of the potential reasoning could be, for example, this comment says, of course, I wouldn't go crazy over a game, but if enough companies pull their service from the country and it inconveniences people's lives enough, then they'll start getting mad and more protests might break out and possibly help cause change in Russia. Of course, they also add on that most of their player base is probably kids, and can't really expect kids to go out protesting over stuff that much or having a big impact in that regard. But on the other side of the coin, they also point out, which I think is really important to point out, that Brawl Stars knew this was going to be overall a negative impact on them. Of course, they're losing one of their largest player bases and revenue generating sources. And even if they allow the game back again, I imagine it would be a smaller, much smaller amount than it was before. So even though this could be a potential PR type move, I still think it's probably an overall net negative for them potentially, but they're hoping that it's a big net positive, or at least a small net positive for Ukraine and Finland. Of course, one other important thing is, what about all the money those Russian players spent on the game? Will they get their money back? Or are they just gonna have to wait for the App Store to come back again for them, and then they can refund their money? Of course, more news needs to be known about all the details for how this could work for Russian players. Let me know what you think of this down below.